Living Deadbeat by Children of Bodom from Are You Dead Yet? 2005. Welcome back to Hybrid Theory. I'm Aurian Archive, and this is Carnage, Part 2. Alright, so, fair shot, right now we are actually recording, streaming on my rebuilt desktop computer. So you can see I am using a Be Quiet Dark Base 700 chassis. I've picked up a Dark Power 12, 7 something watt power supply. And you can also see in the picture that's on the screen, I kind of changed direction at the last moment. Last year, when I was building the computer for the aforementioned client, when I got them the Dark Base 700, I knew it had a USB-C port on the front. What I didn't realize is that USB Type-C required a new header on a motherboard in order to use. And the motherboard I had originally chosen didn't support USB Type-C internal header. Well, the motherboard that I thought I had bought, the Gigabyte Oros, the one I had been looking at on Gigabyte page indicated that it had a USB Type-C internal header. So that was the model I searched for, and the first result that came up was on BHP Video, a site a retailer I've bought from before. I've been incredibly happy with their service. So I just clicked through, and that's what I went with. Well, I got the motherboard in, and I realized I hadn't actually bought the Gigabyte with the internal header. In fact, there's actually a Reddit post that it's not actually available in retail channels. The BHP link had been for the previous flagship B55 board from Gigabyte Oros, the Pro P, and that was what I think I actually showed in the Carnage stream. And it did not register that I had not purchased the correct motherboard to support all of the features the chassis had. Well, after the motherboard got in, I kind of grumped, and after grumping for a bit, I decided to, bite the bullet. I would, put a significant amount more down on credit and go for a flagship X57S motherboard. A slight problem. I've taken a lot of shots at MSI over the years, and going back looking at my G Plus history and Game Nikki history before that, I routinely tore in the MSI for shipping motherboards, AMD motherboards, that completely lacked features the chipsets were supposed to have. And MSI has always given me the impression they don't care. They don't care what the fans think. They don't care what the users think. You can tell them they butchered or they got something wrong, and MSI just doesn't care. And to some extent, I did see some evidence that this is still going on. MSI only supports or looks at reviews from approved sources. Well, who defines the approved sources? Yeah, and once you set an approved sources and you don't give people free reign to express what's wrong with your product, you've now made a colossal mistake that will forever doom your products to being mocked and laughed at and ignored. And for that reason, I wasn't a big fan of the MSI Tomahawk. Yes, the reviews were very good on it from people who have been seeded samples. Obviously, I'm not in MSI's favorite camp. They're not going to be talking to the Mepis Guides guy. They're not going to be talking to the Linux Guides guy because they hate, I repeat, hate every criticism I've leveled against their previous boards. And slight problem for me, the MSI Tomahawk was actually available in retail, was actually available for less money, and people who had been seeded it and the Gigabyte Aura 657Ss were saying the Tomahawk was a better board. They are also saying that the Asus was a better board, but the Asus Rogue, whatever, was significantly more expensive. I think like $150 more expensive than a Tomahawk for not much more. So and this is again why I decided to take this particular shot. My R9 290X is an MSI, and it's been a workhorse. R9 290X is how old now? It's officially been removed from AMD's driver support. It's that old, and the MSI card is still chugging along. It's so as much as I've fussed and howled and screamed at MSI, I had another bullet to bite here, and that my media server is currently using an MSI motherboard. And my media server, aside from the NVIDIA graphics card, when I was using AMD graphics cards on it, has been rock solid. I've had no complaints, and looking through the BIOS on both the B4, I think it's a B450 on the media server, and the X57S that I have now, I'm not actually seeing any major differences between the X570s that I've handled before against the B450 that I've handled before against the B550 that I actually have in hand from Gigabyte Oros. I'm not actually seeing anything missing. If anything, the Tomahawk board has left a very positive impression in me. Now, I really don't know how MSI is going to respond to VT Grumpy Bunny going, oh, hey, this is actually pretty good. I expect some people may freak out and may gonna go, wait, who, what, they said what? But so far, in the time I've had with it, now, I haven't done anything cute. I haven't gone for a world overclocking record. I'm not doing liquid nitrogen. I'm not doing a mineral oil bath. I don't have the money right now to buy more components if I screw something up by being cute and trying to squeeze more performance out of it. I am, however, still using my Super Noctua air cooler. And let's move on. Then we'll kill these pictures off and bring up C3. And I've actually readjusted how the Noctua was in relation to how it's mounted in the previous chassis. And that's because in the previous chassis, the Noctua fans were so close to the exhaust port that I didn't bother having an exhaust fan on there. I just let the CPU fan take care of it. Now, in a picture way later, you'll actually see the not excellent result of that particular decision to only use the Noctua, or no, sorry, not Noctua, that's a Fantanks. Sorry, oh boy. That's actually a Fantanks, not a Noctua. We'll get to why Noctua was on my mind in a minute. I have used a Noctua before, and I think I actually put it in Ryeda's computer. So that's actually a Fantanks, and those are Fantanks fans. It's actually been as good as the Noctua, which is high praise. Wow. Okay, so next picture. And in these next two pictures, I think, no, that's not quite the one I'm looking for. Okay, we'll stick with these two pictures for a second. You might notice that on the Be Quiet case, I don't have the lower, or bring up this picture again. You'll notice that I don't have the lower guide, the cover for the power supply base installed, and that's partially because I'm not sure I have enough fans to properly direct airflow. The Be Quiet case only shipped with two fans, one in the front and one in the rear, and you can see where I've got the hard drive mounted, and what I'm kind of looking at is in this particular picture, I want to put a fan right on top of the hard drives to pull air out of where I have that hard drive at to make sure that it's cooled down. This also hopefully brings some negative air pressure. There is a filter on the bottom of the case, so now we have more filtered air being forced in rather than just through the front. Another thing that I want to do, and I need another fan for, is in this picture at the top, you can see there's a rail up there and some vent holes at the very top of the case, and that's actually there's a rack rail up there that can be pulled out, and fans can be mounted to that. And this is what I did for the custom computer that I built, I actually put a silent wing fan up there to force air out of the case because the vent up top is not filtered and thus is an exhaust vent. And that helps push, it helps create a negative air zone, flowing air from the bottom front to the top past the processor. And hopefully, the person who bought the computer, they live in a high heat environment. They have had no thermal problems whatsoever, so apparently the thermal theory is working. No, I didn't actually smoke test monitor it again. I don't have the cash on hand where if I screw something up, getting cute with smoke trails to replace equipment if I screw up. All right. And so that kind of where I'm at with my own personal desktop computer. Obviously, I do need a new graphic card. Graphic card supply is not stabilized. AMD says that supply will improve, but I'm not sure Lisa Su can actually say that. The big problem here for Lisa Su is that the ODM, the original design manufacturers, and the OEM, the original equipment manufacturers, have their own various contracts and demands to be met. We saw this very recently when a literal pallet loads of ODM and OEM graphic cards showed up in a Dubai mining facility shipped straight out of China and put right into mining rigs. When AMD is up against that kind of pre-sailing going on that they have no direct control over. AMD does not have the market leverage. They don't have a US presidential or secretarial administration that will support them in telling the ODMs and ODMs that they must fulfill client retail orders before they fulfill bulk pallet orders of client retail cards to specialist industries. AMD doesn't have that kind of firepower right now. Now, they may have that firepower after the 2022 elections. That's a distinct possibility. Congress, there may be enough foundationalist types brought into Congress who ride the wave of the resentment against the current political administration that is enabling this behavior. There is a chance that Congress may have AMD's back, whether or not the presidential administration supports being consumer friendly. And let's face it, the current presidential administration is not consumer friendly and has no intention of doing anything to combat supply and demand issues. They just don't. If you think that they are, you're wrong. Okay, let's try to get back on track. Because there's another factor here coming forward, and it's a big factor that's going to come up in a couple minutes. And that's why I wanted to go down this path of making the generic political vague statements now, because it's going to be really important in a couple pictures. We're going to move on. And I've actually have put the media server quasi back together. I did put the serial ATA solid state drive in there. And I did actually get the system to boot up running from a install deck. Now, you might notice the picture has suddenly changed. Well, this is because my phone supports a mode, and I'm trying to cut down on the reflections, and this particular camera mode actually did a wonderful job of cutting down the reflections. That's a Scepter monitor. It took over my corner back here rather than just using it for building. I've now got a monitor set up there. It's an older Scepter. I'm not even don't ask me how old it is. It's big, but it's only a 1080p. It does do FreeSync, but it doesn't do HDR. So it's kind of old, but you can kind of see the report on the screen. The partition of my media server, the primary partition that I tried to adjust the size on, is not repairable. Now, I can access the data, or I can access most of the data. I don't think I actually lost anything, but obviously I don't trust the drive anymore, so I am going to have to replace the drive. You can also see that I really did love how this, I was using this film photo for review for the Drop New Force Move earbuds on drop.com. They're selling refurbished for like $20. It's really good price. It's a really good product for $20 at the MSRP of $130. It's not such a good buy. Anyways, So that was one of the other things that I've been working on. I have not gotten back in contact with the person who offered to buy me a solid state drive for this. So I'm probably going to do that after this live stream post. Uh, I really don't have that much more to say here. This is my media server is kind of on hold because I may have another use for that solid state drive, and we'll bring up the final picture that I took. Yeah, this is the Silverstone SG10, and mm, you can see the effect of not having direct ventilation. Yeah, um, that's a lot of dust. That's a lot of dust. Um, So this is a kind of embarrassing. You may also know that I've already got a different motherboard and system in there. That's actually, as you can see from the text, that's a DFI LAN Party Junior. That is my Intel i7-920, the one that Intel did send me to review several years ago for Game Nikki and Mepis Guides. I'm really wanting to put this back into operation. Now, most of that because Morbid, you know, it's still a 16-thread processor. It's not very fast. It's only like 2 gigahertz or so. It's not going to be very powerful, not have a very high thread throughput by today's standards. There's probably half a dozen AMD chips that could outrun it without a problem that are under $100. But there's a bit of nostalgia here. I always did love the triple channel memory, even if it never was practical under Windows. It really did make a difference under Linux operations. And my immediate intent is if I can finish putting this system back together and it works, which, given the amount of dust in there, this is an open question. And I also broke out since I was talking about sound quality earlier, my Asus Zonar card. Okay, it's not very powerful by today's standards, and I could probably get much better. It's another one where if I'm going to put this back together, why not go ahead and try to fit this in the case? And this is why I went down the bit from Lisa Sue earlier about how supply may improve on Radeon graphics cards. I don't think they will, because I don't think AMD has control over the ODMs and OEMs who are actually producing the cards. I don't think AMD can guarantee that graphic cards will actually go to retailers. Until AMD does what they did with Valve and a pre-order that is locked to gamer accounts that gives the miners no chance to purchase a product, they must get in line with everyone else, and they have a decreed priority. You can't, with the Steam Deck, you couldn't just make a Steam account and then pre-purchase or pre-order a Steam Deck. If you made an account or you had a recent account, you had to wait while people with established accounts got to go first. That was brilliant on Steam, on Valve's part with Steam, and that's how AMD should really approach the next launch of the Radeon graphic card. They have to do pre-orders, they have to do pre-purchases, and they have to do a lockout system. And working with Valve, working with Steam, since they've already done this with the Steam Deck, working with Valve and working with Steam to implement that same pre-purchase is a great way to shut down the miners full stop. Is however many graphic cards, how many chips are allocated, those are what gamers get a first shot at on Steam to buy, and then, only then, after those pre-orders and pre-purchases have gone through, then orders can be opened up for general purposes, and only then can ODMs or OEMs offer product to the miners. Only after the existing clientele base has been satisfied. Valve's already shown they can do this with a Steam Deck, and they did it for literally, what I hear, millions of orders. As in, let's make this clear. I think, from what I heard, that the Steam Deck on launch has already pre-sold, outsold the Switch. That's how many orders Valve has taken. Now, obviously, not everyone who placed an order is going to get a Steam Deck. But Valve's not joking when they say that the Steam Deck will probably be an upgrade for the vast majority of their player base. And this goes back to, I've talked about it before, a certain site, run from Baronix, runs fear, uncertainty, and doubt articles about how low the Linux penetration is on Steam. And those articles are misleading at best, and Microsoft bomber error, fear, uncertainty, doubt at worst. And the fact is, my media server has Steam installed. My Windows desktop, which has a Linux side, which I use quite often, has Steam installed. My laptop, which is dual booted between Windows and Linux, has Steam installed on both sides. I can count on one hand, actually, I only need one finger to tell you the number of times when running under a Linux side on any platform that I've gotten a Steam hardware survey. I can tell you that on each platform I'm running under Windows, I see that Steam hardware survey pop up at least once a month. So Valve's sample base for opt-in, first of all, you have to opt in. Valve just can't take your data and say, here's the public data. You have to opt into the Steam. You also have to see the Steam survey. And in my personal experience, using Linux and Windows almost equally, I've almost never seen the Steam hardware survey on Linux platforms. Now, Valve, on the other hand, they know, because of Steam installations and records, exactly how many actual Linux gamers there are or how many people are using Linux platforms. They know how many people are trying to use Steam on Chromebooks. They may not publish that information because they don't have permission, and that's a very distinctive point here. Valve does not have the permission from the users, unless they explicitly ask for it, to publish what platforms Steam is actually being used on. And that's a critical difference that the Steam public charts don't show. And that's also why you see things like Intel and NVIDIA dominating the Steam charts, because they're only catching people who are opting into the survey. They're not catching the entire screenshot of the user base. And that's why Valve can quite confidently say that the Steam Deck is an upgrade for most Steam gamers, because it is. It may only be an APU, but it's still going to be an upgrade because the vast majority of Valve's user base haven't been able to buy an actual graphics card. And now we're coming back to what's on the screen, this Intel system. My intent right now is, assuming for the moment that Intel launches a dual slot graphics card, I would like to put that graphics card, that ARC GPU, into up with this 97 with this old 920. I mean, really old 920. I really want to put them two together, just kind of so I have a pure Intel box. That's, maybe that's being a little silly, but I'd like to look at people and say, this is the Intel engineering sample. If Raja, it's like going, yeah, sure, we can send you an engineering sample of the ARC. I'd probably be, I'm horrible at breaking NDAs. It's most of the hardware vendors kind of know that. I'm probably not the person to trust when it comes to NDAs, unless you're actually getting my help on something. And if you're getting my help, then I'm probably not talking about whatever I'm involved in, because something's really broken and it needs to be fixed before it goes out. And I know there's probably some glares going around on that one. So I'd love to get my hands on an ARC on a pre-production sample. I don't think I am. I probably burned way too many bridges in the past. At some point, burning bridges does come back to be a problem. But that's kind of my intent. I'm probably not actually going to finish working on this Intel system until ARC is actually launched and I can lay hands on one. Now, that being said, there are some other immediate issues besides the dust. The first one may be apparent from I tried to take an angle to show the problem. That low-profile processor fan I got on there, I bought that so that this would fit into an Apevia XQ pack, which had placed the power supply over the processor fan. So you needed a low-profile fan, a low-profile heatsink, to get motherboards to work in the Apevia. Well, I'm obviously not using the PV anymore. Actually, when I took the Intel motherboard out of there, that old Apivia case is in a dumpster somewhere. Yes, I threw something away. But it does bring up a problem is I need at least, I think, four things. I need a power supply. Now, if I can get with Corsair and either get my 720 repaired or 750, whatever it is, RM, or, I can get with Corsair and they can tell me what's going on with the AIX 860 and I can get that fixed, then I'll have another power supply on hand. I won't have to go and get one. The other thing is that I probably do need a proper exhaust fan on the end because obviously that processor fan is not positioned the right way to exhaust the case, and obviously trusting on the processor fan to exhaust the case didn't quite work without better filtration for incoming air and a better overall airflow. Uh, so that's kind of going to have to get some more fans for this. And because of I'm not really interested in replacing the heatsink on the i7 920. If I replace the heatsink, I'm now sinking more money into something that I already know that worked the last time I used it until I robbed it for parts. And so we'll move on to the browser window. Come on. It should be this one. There we go. And as you can probably tell from the screen, I am on an HDR enabled display, and OBS is not HDR compatible compliant yet. So, apology for the washed out colors, but I think you can see enough of the text. There is actually a vendor who is making DDR3 RAM in a triple channel configuration that does fall within the limitations of this motherboard and the i7 920. You can see it's actually not priced that bad for a decent amount of memory. So this is one thing that's kind of on I would like to get. Another thing that I'm going to need, and this is so we're power supply 1, RAM 2, its graphics card was 3, and we already talked about I'd really like to pick up an Intel Arc for this system. Uh, Next thing is a slim fan to fit in, going back to the C8 picture or Carnage 8. Going back to Carnage 8, the gap between the fan and the processor fan and the uh, rear fan is under 25 millimeters. I measure it somewhere around 23, 22 millimeters. So a standard 120 millimeter by 25 millimeter fan simply won't fit in this chassis. Or at least, again, I have to replace the processor fan, and I'm not really quite willing to go to that point yet to bring this old system back to life or bring these whole components back to life. So the current idea is Scythe makes a slim fan. This is, I think, 15 millimeters thick. Does it actually tell me? Yeah, it's simply low profile. Okay, there it is. Dimension 120 by 120 x 15. If I highlight that, that may be readable. I'm looking at this on the streaming window and going, wow, that is so washed out. And this is why I called the fan tanks a Noctua earlier, because I was actually looking at a Noctua thin. Now, I've used these Noctua thins before. I've used the brown with power management for a number of custom cases. Wow, you can't even see the edges on that fan on the stream. Sorry. Uh, I think that's actually why I had the black chosen and why I was looking at a Chromax. Uh, and this is a 120 miller by 15 millimeter fan. And uh, this is one of the things that I'm looking at getting. for this case. And again, it's kind of pretty much already at my budget cap, so we're probably a long way away from getting this. But a 120 miller 15 millimeter fan should fit into the gap in this case. And then I may add some more fans. There's on the lower half of the Silverstone SG10. There's actually a line of 3 fans that are filtered, pushing air into the computer. I have only like one of those fan spaces filled, so I probably need to pick up additional fans to go in there, and that may help with the dust problem. So that's where I'm at with what's going on with the computer systems. So now I'm able to at least stream from the from my primary desktop. It at least is running. I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I've always assumed that my R9 290X was dying because it's been having problems, and no other component was. Well, since I put the deep quiet power supply in there, the application for the R9 290X would hard crash is not hard crashing at anymore at all. And I guess more insultingly to me is, misdiagnosing a problem. I never considered that a power supply could possibly be the issue here, because if a power supply starts failing, you normally get other things going wrong. The computer won't turn on, the processor voltage decreases, you have flickering, you've got other determinable issues that were not being displayed. So I don't know. I clear misdiagnosis, or for all I know, the R929X is just deciding to behave now that it has a little bit more room for the airflow to go, since it's not in a really tight chassis anymore. It does sound like a hurricane when it spins up all the way. It's definitely more noisy than the 5700 XT I put into the client build last year, at least at full tilt. Full tilt in this case is determined by 2 instances of City of Heroes, both loaded into Granville at the same time, which still will bring almost any graphics card to its knees. Yeah, probably even the RTX 3090 would probably whimper at 2 open sessions of Granville. Yeah, I could go into that all day. Anyway, so I've got some place I need to be in 20 minutes, so we'll cut it off here. And this has been Aurian Archive with Carnage.